if I start telling people about hell, I might just scare them off. Where are you going to scare them off to? Hell number 2? Or are you just going to sit there and let them burn?
So with all this going on, right? Yeah, and the way that our culture is going, do you think that possibly it could be a direct result from a lot of these pagan rituals?
There definitely will be an interplay. There's going to be some connections, but at the same time, the event itself is unique in that it really depends on what people bring to the table, and it's not just simply a one-time thing. Burning Man is how do I describe this? A menu. It's a structure that allows all kinds of people to bring in all kinds of different ideas. So during the whole week, there are hundreds and hundreds of different things happening within Black Rock City, within the Burning Man community. And I mean hundreds. I have the Where, What, When guides going back to 2011, and they are 160 pages thick of different events taking place on a daily basis. Everything from really interesting workshops to stuff that is definitely the kind of stuff you don't want your kids to know about.
Yeah.
Not going to find it in the Bible, except in the bad places. So you know what? This is some really nasty stuff. A lot of very open sexual debauchery. That definitely plays into some of it. And it's just, like I said, it's a palette for whatever people bring to the table.
Do you see this like one of the springboards for the one world religion?
Yes and no. It definitely is a part of that puzzle in that it's a reflection of what your culture already holds to. It's a reflection already of what your neighbors believe, whether they go to Burning Man or not. This is the importance of this. This is a reflection of our society today. So regardless of whether or not you go to Burning Man or whether you don't go to Burning Man, odds are really high you're going to have family members that will fit within at least some of the thinking, the philosophy that kind of percolates throughout the event, because the event is nothing more than just simply a reflection of your culture.
Right. And we see this because the reason I'm asking so many questions along this route is because I'm looking what's going on in entertainment. I'm looking at the climate, the social climate. Even though I know a lot of it's engineered, still in the background we have all these things going on as far as diversity and gender fluidness and trans this and trans that and transhumanism, and a lot of this is still going back to the old gods.
Yeah, there's a sense that that man is ascending, that man is becoming more than man. And that really boils down to what this is all about. I mean, it's about the idea that we can become, that we are not happy with being. We're not happy with just being human. We want to become something more. We want to become bigger than what God has placed us within. And that goes back again to Genesis 3, because Genesis 3 is all about Adam and Eve, in essence, saying we reject being. We reject being in God's will. We reject being made in His image. Now we reject what we are to be. Now we want to focus on becoming. We will become as God. We will become knowledgeable and enlightened. We will become. And we're always, ever since then, gentlemen, we have been striving to become. And transhumanism is about becoming. The idea of interreligious dialogue and interfaithism, or the cultural side, transformational culture, Burning Man, and a myriad of other events that are very similar. All of that is this expression of just we are becoming. We want to become. We are not satisfied with being made in God's image. We want to become made in our own image. And so we've been striving for that this is the story of humanity's rebellion.
Yeah. Looking into the book of Revelation and other books of the Bible, and we have no idea what the end times, the end, the great tribulation, those times where demons are actually physically manifesting, people not repenting from their fornication, their witchcraft, their drug abuse, and all sorts of other things, even though the gospel is still being preached, and when they see the Son of Man coming, I'm just looking at this in my own imaginary landscape, you know, because what you're laying out here about the being and wanting to become gods, and you see that there's so many different facets going on.
Angles. Oh my
Say
gosh.
again, please.
Yes. Angles. There's so many different angles you're coming from. I'm sitting here going, okay, okay. It's hard, Chris.
Yeah,
You know, I'm trying to imagine, like, just like you, and I don't even know where to start. There's so many different places that I could point to. You know.
And you're right. There are a lot of angles. Here's the beauty of it. There's a simplicity, and yet there's a complicated aspect to it. The simplicity is this. It's as simple as man seeking to become enlightened through our own wisdom and becoming our own masters, rejecting at that point then rejecting what God's will is. I always thought that God was harsh when he said that the consequences of our sin would be death. For the longest time when I was a younger person, that kind of bothered me. But no, it makes logical sense. If we turn away from the author of life, because that's what he is, the logical consequence has to be death. And so at its most fundamental, the most basic aspect of all of these diverse things that we're talking about is this desire all the way back to the garden that we can be our own masters. And now, how that plays out, that's where it gets complicated, because it plays out in a bazillion different ways. And if I'm honest about it, it plays out in my life too. It plays out in your life. We're always at war with that. We're always struggling with that. For every individual that's lived, it's played out in their life. And it's constantly at war with our Lord. And so this is really the battle of the ages, the internal battle, and it's also played out externally. It's simple, and yet it plays out in very complicated ways sometimes.
In Psalms 2, it talks about the kings of the earth gathering themselves together and their council to see how they shall become one together. And one of the things that I often look at it says, or they're saying, let us cast his bands asunder, or their bands asunder. In other words, God had placed these bands in place, these limitations in place. But men today are saying, we're going to throw these off. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to do the things that we want to, like you said, the years, or this year's Burning Man is going to be the man and the temple, or something, whatever it is. But when I look at these things, this is what I see. I see man trying to become enlightened, which is they're pushing or leaving the presence of God. They want to turn their back, or their backs, on what God had put in place. And I think it's frightening for me.
No, I agree. It is, and it is frightening, and it should be frightening, because what will happen is we will have a situation, and we know this is coming, where God will end up judging the world, and he will be judging it through Jesus Christ. And I look back at the Tower of Babel, and I see that as a very interesting model for how God comes down. And it wasn't that the Tower of Babel was that it was a threat to God. The Tower of Babel it's not a threat to God, but he comes down and he disperses it, and he ends their construction. And he does so because if he hadn't done it, he would have had to judge even harsher, much harsher. And that's implied in that section of scripture. Well, that was the Tower of Babel. And ever since then, we've been trying to build towers of Babel, whether they're cultural towers of Babel, or technological towers of Babel, or religious towers, or political towers. And now we're building the next tower. We're building a final tower. And just as in the first tower, God is going to come again, and he's going to judge.
Yes, he is. We were talking earlier, and I mentioned the UFOs, and you said it wasn't a really big aspect of these conferences.
No.
That's interesting to me, because of all the propaganda going on within the movies, the kids shows, all of our entertainment, the UFO thing is flooding everywhere, and it's like they're preparing us for some type of soft disclosure or hard disclosure, whatever it is. But you mentioned something about the New Age teachings and what you found out.
Yes, and there is some elements of ufology with some of this, but it's not near as prevalent in the circles that I've been in. A few years ago, Burning Man had a kind of a UFO. Well, it wasn't kind of. It was a UFO theme. And a number of years ago, oh, wow, got to think about this, going back to 97, 98, something like that. No, 99. I was in another pagan event where there was a lot of channeled messages and a lot of channeling taking place at the event itself, and the claim being that these are channeled messages from extraterrestrial entities. And I have a fair amount of channeled messages and literature and books in my library, my research library. And the one thing, though, that is one of those threads that is there is this. As you go through those channeled messages and you go through what they're saying, supposedly saying, they always say basically the same thing. You can become as God. You just don't know it, but you're really divine. You need to find the Messiah within yourself. Don't wait for the second coming of Christ. Become your own Messiah. You have a lot of that. You also have a lot of things like you need to get together under one political system as bearers of the light so that you can save Mother Earth and you can save the environment. There's a lot of deep ecology. And so I find it interesting how UFOs supposedly came from, billions of light years away and billions of galaxies distance from us. And they come to give us Shirley MacLaine, the New Age movement, Al Gore, and Karl Marx. I mean, really?
Yeah.
Really?
The worst.
I think I know who you are by your message.
If you like our videos, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to get all our frequent updates.